Welcome to Millennials Meet Liberty, your source for searing hot libertarian takes on the world's weekly headlines. Here's your host, Colt Thompson.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode number 16 of Millennials Meet Liberty. That's right. Welcome back to Double ML Podcast featuring yours truly, Colt Thompson. Happy to be here with you all as usual today. Got quite a bit in store for you, something that's a little more along the lines of excitement than just plain old explanations of basic economic principles that basically escape the minds of the regulars in the United States on a daily basis. What I got for you today is I actually, and maybe some of you already know this, last week, I'm recording this for Friday, of course, the day you guys are listening now, but last week I had the opportunity to go on to I guess it's called the Majority Report with Sam Seder. Now, I'm going to start off by saying I'm not popular at all. Nobody really knows who I am out there in the world outside of my family, friends, and you diehard listeners here that I've developed early on. So I was not invited on the show. So what ended up happening was my brother, who's very lefty-leaning in his own personal worldview and what he believes about the economy and social issues, he was really and has been just a big fan of the Majority Report featuring Sam Seder and his cohorts there. So basically what ended up happening was my brother was like, look, why don't you call in? Because they have this opportunity every day or every few days where libertarians call in and they basically get roasted. So the idea of the segment is libertarians show up and they kind of state what they're all about, and then they get teared to shreds basically intellectually by that of Sam and whoever else is on the program. So I figured, you know what, I think I can hold my own. Leftists in general, regardless of how intelligent they are or however high their IQ are, is their ideas are just simply wrong. So it's pretty easy to refute them. That's why I kind of laugh when people say they really want to vote for whoever's the most intelligent candidates when they vote for certain offices. And to me, that's really irrelevant. To me, I would vote for somebody who is, had an IQ of 7, who is like a caveman, who had the right ideas than that of someone who's a genius and had the ideas that these people parrot on the Majority Report every week. So what we're looking for is good, correct answers to moral issues, economic issues, and issues that the government creates day in and day out. We're not looking for who's smarter or funnier. Well, what ended up happening was it was just so happened to be that I was indeed smarter than all of them considerably, and I also was funnier, which I didn't expect at all because I think Sam was a comedian, so I kind of put him in a body bag there the first 10 minutes. But I kind of laugh because in these type of environments, you don't get an opportunity really to flesh out your ideas. It's really short little sound bites and them trying to make you look bad, which they didn't. I will admit that they caught me a few times where I didn't have like a super long explanation that the audience probably wanted. And there's reasons for that. I mean, if you look around, and I encourage you guys all to watch this video so you can reference what I'm talking about, but if you look around and let's say that the government monopolized horses and buggies in the 1910s, and they said that we need to have this monopolized, and this is the way we're going to go forward. Well, of course, I'm not going to be able to predict in the 1910s what the automobile industry would look like if it was freed up and then we didn't have to have horse and buggies. No one could have imagined what that was going to look like. So it takes a serious level of intelligence and creativity to really figure out what the free market's going to end up doing. And that's the point of all this, that when you speak as a libertarian, when you say you want to free the market in certain aspects of the economy, you really can't predict what the future is going to look like. It's just very, very difficult. And what the leftist wants is they want all the answers and they want them now. And the funny thing is everything that they think is right and correct and sure and what will happen never ends up happening. And it's not because of the people on the right. It's because of government in general is never able to achieve what leftists pretend like the government can achieve. It just cannot do that. It's simply the nature of government and the people therein. So just going over the episode and my thoughts on the entire thing, I'm just going to kind of wheel and deal like I normally do and, make light of everything and try not to be too offensive, because at the end of the day, I really appreciated those guys having me on their program by a half hour. I really had no idea that I was going to be able to go on the program for a half hour. I didn't know that's how long the segments were. I just blindly called in. What I ended up doing, this was kind of the pseudo strategy I invented, kind of spur of the moment. I just started blasting their comment feed with all sorts of libertarian spam in their eyes, saying taxation is theft, yada, 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 all the stuff that are just truisms. There's nothing wrong in those things. They're all dead nuts accurate, but they really trigger people on the left. And of course, I got muzzled. I mean, that's the world of leftism. They'll try to censor you and ruin you and make sure your ideas are not allowed to be spoken of. And that's basically what happened in the feed there because, of course, I was being quite obnoxious. So going forward, I kind of hung in there for another half hour while some woman droned and moaned about the radical right. I didn't bother to listen to her. I mean, I try my hardest not to listen to fools like that. And half the reason a layman like me can go on to a Sam Seder show and knock him around intellectually is because libertarians really just care about learning the economics and care about understanding the nature of government and how the world actually works. Whereas people like Sam Seder and that guy with the crooked nose next to him looked like Toucan Sam. I mean, those guys are getting caught up in like Mueller reports and Russia probes and shit that's irrelevant. I mean, as libertarians, we know not to worry about that. I mean, what's going to happen is millions of dollars are going to be exhausted on that. Nothing's going to become of it. It's just a big joke. It's a political shit show. And we'll have the election in a year anyway. So basically just it'll prove to be government just pissing more money down the drain. But so that's the thing. I mean, libertarians, we really hone in on actual issues. We don't give one fuck about the entertainment around some impeachment circus that's really going to prove to, flesh out nothing of any relevance at all. So that's what these guys do. They kind of fuck around and like to provide some entertainment to people, and people start chasing the little shine. It's kind of like the cat, looking at the laser pointer on the wall. They're just chasing that around while libertarians are kind of just, there's the door. But anyway, here's the deal. So I hopped on the show and they let me on. And admittedly, I was a little bit nervous because I figured this was going to be broadcasted to quite a few people. I really didn't know that he had 750,000 followers, that Sam, that is. And so I kind of hopped on there, and I'll start from the jump is obviously I'm a lot more witty and intelligent than Sam. I think everyone could pick up on that pretty quickly. But actually what was going on is there was a delay in the tape. So, or whatever it was, the communication stream, there was a delay. So there was kind of like a pause every time he spouted something off and expected me to put forth an answer. So there was almost like this 2-second delay, which kind of made me sound kind of dumb, I feel like. But I'm sure if someone was astute enough, they could realize there was a delay in the mic action. So I'm sure he's done this to libertarians before. This is just kind of his shtick, and he's probably talking to a lot of people who just hate the government or not very intelligent or don't have very refined views, because it is very difficult as a libertarian to have very refined views on the truth and what the market would look like in the future absent government. It's very, very, very difficult, but that doesn't mean we're wrong because we are indeed correct. So what ended up happening was he started everything off by asking like what a libertarian was, or what my version of libertarianism was, or what type of libertarian I was, which was perfectly fine. And right then and there, he's trying to dress this thing up by putting me in a box so he can start attacking. He wants to really figure it out. And that's why I kind of quickly in my mind said, you know what, I'm just going to define it as the opposite of progressivism, because people act like it's hard to define what a libertarian is. I mean, it's about a million times harder to define what a progressive is because they all have their different agendas. Some want free healthcare, some want free college, some want a freedom dividend, and they all want different types of taxes. I mean, that is totally incomprehensibly harder to define than what a libertarian is. I mean, libertarians, they don't want government. They want to minimize government. It's pretty fucking simple. It's the reason we're the party of principle. It's the reason we came out decades ahead of these major parties and liberals and conservatives and decried things as immoral, like the drug war and marriage inequality. I mean, we're ahead of these fucking bozos like Sam Seder and his partner there. And it made me feel like that it was almost like I was talking to someone who rode the short bus when he kept asking me about taxation and how it was not theft. I mean, he kept trying to convince himself that taxation wasn't theft on air. I mean, simply put, it is. I mean, this isn't just some layman Colt Thompson talking here. I mean, this is Judge Andrew Napolitano. This is Ron Paul, people far more superior intellectually than this idiot, Sam Seder. And then not to mention the fact that the founding fathers all decried taxation as immoral as well. I mean, that's half the reason we, as colonies, broke away from the kingship over there in Great Britain. So I don't know what they're talking about. So on its face, I mean, grass is green, the sky is blue, taxation is theft. This isn't anything that's very, very difficult. So I don't need to go explain myself, do the mental gymnastics that Seder was trying to pull off to verify that taxation is indeed theft. I don't need to do that. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I just have to state the obvious and make sure that he doesn't, let me bend at the knee there, because that's what happens. These liberals want to make people give in and cave. I'm not going to do that on principle. I'm going to stand up for what's right and true and move along and go from there. So of the half hour I was on there, the first 10 minutes, he was trying to convince me and convince himself that taxation was not theft. So he was just lying to himself for 10 minutes, and apparently his audience gobbled that up. I mean, I went through the comment section and looked at everything, and I kind of achieved what I thought I would. I mean, there was a lot of people's heads exploding in the comments. It completely overtook that of this Ann person who was droning and moaning. But that's probably what happens every time. I mean, people like a good debate, especially when it's tearing apart something that they don't believe in. which is just the truth, ironically enough. So it's funny that in today's society, we can have people like that command a huge audience, the Majority Report. So really the first 10 minutes was him trying to pretend like taxation wasn't theft, which is fine. I mean, it got kind of annoying after a while, but I definitely had some quips and some zingers there that I didn't even really know I was capable of. I mean, the guy's a comedian. I thought he was going to be funny and witty, but I guess he's more of a stuttering, stammering, kind of confused what he believes type guy. But anyway, so going beyond that, it ended up devolving into, can you basically have private security and private court systems, which you can, arbitration, mediation, and private security. None of these things are wrong. And then, I mean, I kept answering the same question like pretty simply because he was trying to get me to like change my answer, I think, as if that's what he was looking for. And nothing that I said was actually wrong at all. Everything was completely bulletproof. Now, was the explanations really fleshed out a lot? No, I chose not to sometimes. And then oftentimes he just cut me off and spoke over me because I wasn't going to be allowed to speak a long time because that would totally out them for the frauds that they are. I mean, that's just how these things operate. I'm not going to embarrass him that much. I mean, after he's reconciled the fact, I'm sure the first 10 minutes were a shit show for him. He probably didn't want me to talk too much, hence the liberals placing muzzles on conservative libertarian types. But anyway, going forward past that, I think the guy next to him, I don't know if his name's Robert or something. I don't know, some cock on the left. Basically, I think he thinks he was the smartest guy in the room between him and Sam. I can just tell he kind of gives off that aura. And at one point, Sam like tried pigeonholing me and calling me, a libertarian who thought that feudalism was the way to go. I was describing feudalism, and admittedly, I didn't know what that was. So I said that, and then they said they would look it up because I guess they didn't know. Why couldn't they have just told me? But anyway, I looked up feudalism real quick, and of course, it has a king. So yeah, basically, feudalism is essentially a type of socialism, I would say. So socialism, fascism, communism, Marxism, any type of ism that is not libertarianism or free markets is all under the umbrella of totalitarianism. That means top-down approaches. So when you have a king, well, of course, a kingship, a monarchy, feudalistic society, an oligarchy, whatever, what have you, that's a lot closer to socialism, and that's a lot closer to what the colonists were trying to escape from, and they ultimately did to found the republic here that was not in the midst of a king or queen, and an area where we weren't necessarily hell-bent on democracy, but more of a republic, because we wanted good government in terms of a republic. We weren't interested in people saying what their opinions were. We were more interested in good government. So anyway, the whole feudalism thing made me chuckle because I didn't need to know the definition of feudalism to know that wasn't libertarianism or liberty. I mean, I have no idea what they were talking about. They kept saying something along the lines of we need some monopoly of force and contract, I don't know, there's something to do along the lines of just honoring contracts. We need a monopoly of force. I kept insisting on that. And I said, we don't need that. And that wasn't enough for them. And they kept beating me over the head. And the reason I'm focusing on this is because I didn't get much of an opportunity to flesh it out. It was one of the areas where I thought was a little bit weak from what I was saying. But yeah, I mean, there is no one world order right now. There is no one Supreme Court for the entire globe, that is. So you're going down the paradigm. I mean, we already have hundreds of countries that have their own versions of Supreme Courts. That's all I was saying. In a decentralized world, we would just have smaller subsets. The issues that the United States have, and hence why they're the most politically divided country in the United States, I mean, arguably one of them is because of their sheer size. So we just need to decentralize. So the Supreme Courts they kept hearkening on, or maybe they were just a smaller version of the Supreme Courts that were more free market-esque. There was different levels of arbitration mediation. There's nothing wrong with that, like I said. So I just love this paradigm because they always want to escalate something up or down. So to the extent that they do that, I would do the same thing. I would say, look, they want to tax the 1%. Well, I guess on a global level, if you're going to play this intellectual meta battle game, well, then why doesn't that mean that everyone in the United States should be forced to give most of their income to the poor people all over the world, because we are indeed the 1%. And of course, liberals and people in this country aren't going to want to do that. They're just going to say, well, it's because we're just in the confines of this country. And yeah, sure, that's fine. But that's not the main reason. The principle at hand is, why should we not be forking that over? If you think that's okay within our society, why is that not okay on a global scale? And that's where liberals are hypocrites. They're just complete idiots on that stuff. I mean, economics completely evades them. So going on that show is pretty funny. I really would have loved to debate even further. Actually, the following day, I went on and started trolling again. What I was going to do was going to go on this Pacman guy show, some fellow named David Pacman. I mean, I think these Kyle Kulinski, Dave Pacman, Sam Seder, they all kind of roll in the same Young Turks enclave there, the whole left is best thing. This is something I'm quickly picking up on, and this is, I think, really what my brother's interested in listening to and all of these types. So he was like, why don't you call into Pacman? That guy's a little sharper than Seder, which it doesn't take much to be sharper than Sam Seder, clearly, if you think taxation's not theft and you're going to continue to pretend like it's not. But So what ended up happening was I was going to call in, and I immediately got suckered into the idea of going back on the Sam Seder show, because I think deep down people's hearts, the people who are somewhat honest and probably moreover intelligent who listen to his show are like, you know what, that libertarian guy, he definitely was right. And maybe I'm not going to admit that in my own mind that he's right, but he had some good points, and I think they wanted me back on. And so I started trolling in his feed again for the second day in a row. And I was actually getting kind of funnier this time around. And then all of a sudden there was like a few death threats and libertarians' lives don't matter. And we want to get Colt fired from his job. And all these people start heaping on. And that's how the left operates. I mean, they hate people. I mean, politics is basically their entire lives. And that's just how they operate. I mean, they can't distinguish politics from, a normal civilized life. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to back off all of this. I don't need any of this bullshit right now, because it would have been fun to go back on and kind of intellectually body some of these guys again, because I really wanted to debate the idiot who said something about feudalism. It's feudalism. Like, he loved talking in these different tones. Like, once they hung up on me, because I didn't hang up on them at the end, he started I think he was talking like Bernie Sanders or someone. I don't know what exactly he was trying to get at, but yeah, I really liked that I wove in at the end something from my podcast that was totally ad hominem, just kind of whipped in there last second. And then same thing with just kind of fleshing out real quick just what's happened over time in society and how billions have been lifted out of poverty by capitalism. I can just look at the Toucan Sam guy who kept talking about feudalism. I would look at that guy. I can see how pissed it made him. Like, yeah, that's good, because I'm just telling you exactly how the world works. He didn't like it. So this whole thing made me chuckle. I mean, they're going to pretend like taxation is not theft. They're going to pretend like they can just place someone in the Oval Office and that's going to make everything better. Let's just get Bernie. And if we just, by doggone it, if we just get the right guy, that's the answers to all of this. I mean, it's so simplistic and cartoonish. It's just stupid. And then they were trying to mock me for saying, that's economics. And then Sam was trying to mock me by saying that I was getting a little defensive, for which I wasn't. I think everybody could realize that he was actually only the one getting defensive and raising his voice and yelling. I was keeping it pretty calm, cool, and collective. I mean, I knew going into this, these guys didn't know what they were talking about, so I'm not going to be that mean. I just matter-of-factly told them what was going on, because that's what people don't want to hear, but they need to hear it. I just need to state the obvious and make sure the truth is spoken, even if the people are going to be pissed off who listen to a show, or they're going to be insulted as well. I mean, they were calling me in the comments smug and arrogant, and that was, the most arrogant person who's ever been on and all this stuff. And I love to hear that, because it's not arrogant just to tell the truth. It's really just shocking to tell the truth. It's something that people don't hear often. If you're tuning in and listening to the follies of Sam Seder and his cohorts there, well, of course, you're going to become soft. You're not going to realize what's going on in the world. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast here. And again, I want to go back to that part where he's saying, well, that's economics. Like, he was kind of like writing that off as if that was like some sort of minor point, like the minutia. Well, that was a really big thing. I mean, I want to say that one more time. If you look at a continuum, further to the right is, again, let's say free markets, liberty, voluntary interaction. And to the left, as you slide leftwards, is government, state control, and the diminishment of that liberty. So it's very, very simple. Moving to the left is market intervention by that of government. Moving to the right is less government intervention in the markets. So obviously, any single market or sector of the economy that has less government oversight and intervention and regulation and taxation, yeah, they flourish. They have the best outcomes. They have the most abundance of goods at the cheapest cost, at the types and quantities of goods that people really desire and want. And then you have the opposites to the left. So everything that these guys advocate for, the Bernie Sanders agenda, like free college, which isn't free, free healthcare, which isn't free, expanding Social Security. Many of these social programs, they are diminishing liberty and really fucking up the economy overall. And I've explained that in my previous podcast in terms of what happened in the college education world. And I'm going to devote an entire podcast to the Medicare for All world and just kind of debunk that entire folly. But really what we had back in the day was a country where everything was very, very cheap as far as what was abundantly available. So the medical services, while they may not have been as good because of the, rapid acceleration of the free markets and the, best techniques born out of that. But let's just say whatever the healthcare world looked like in the 1940s and 50s or 30s or 20s, whatever, whether, there was really good x-ray technology or maybe there wasn't MRIs quite yet or whatever was going on in that world, all those services, while they weren't as good as 2019 because they weren't as technologically savvy back then and they weren't up to snuff, well, the actual access to those things was extremely cheap in those dollars back in the day. And they were abundantly available because there was more of a market for it. There's supply and demand there, and it was allowed to happen, and people didn't worry about those things. And then it's kind of like what I talked about before. I mean, once societies grow in population and once these services look really, really commonplace, but maybe there's a couple people in this increasingly big population that lose out on those things because they truly are in a difficult spot, that's when the politicians and the people at the top, the Bernie Sanders of the world, they jump in and say, well, we cannot have poverty, or we cannot have someone going uninsured. And when they do that, they just want a complete takeover. And right now, what the shame is all we've done is just gradually gone left on the continuum in healthcare and left on the continuum in education and left on the continuum of a lot of aspects of our economy. And it's created this malaise in this half-ass world of where we basically have socialized medicine, but it's not quite Medicare for all yet. I mean, we have full-blown Medicare, we have Medicaid, we have all this third-party system. I mean, we have all of these things that are basically socialized medicine. They're just not quite the socialism they're looking for in their pie-in-the-sky idea. And this really is despite all of the deficits and the ballooning debts and all of these things that are coming down the pike that are really going to come back to haunt us, especially with these shortfalls in Social Security, so on and so forth. So we have all these issues, and what we really need to do is decentralize the United States. What we need is rapid decentralization. I think that's actually the most respectful and humane thing that possibly could happen here in the United States in terms of people getting what they want and better outcomes. I've spoke about this at great length. I mean, if Vermont was allowed to have their version of Medicare for all and Texas was allowed to have their free markets, then so be it for health insurance or health services. And if some states wanted to frack and others didn't want to frack, that's fine too. I mean, I don't think we need the federal government making any of these decisions at all. And people should be able to migrate and be mobile and go where they want to go and just go to town. So looking back on that whole talk with Sam and everything, I think it was really entertaining. While I insulted him to his face because I think he really deserved it, it had to be done. I mean, you got to make sure these people understand what the true situation is, even if they don't want to believe it, because believe me, propping up that business they have and those 750 million subscribers, whatever it is, 750,000. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't just stop selling the Kool-Aid at that point. I mean, you can't just throw in the towel and change your views. I mean, people are going to call you a sellout and they're going to stop watching. And now they have money that they're getting from that, you know? So who knows? I mean, what I'm selling here, liberty, is unbelievably difficult to sell, even for people who are geniuses at libertarianism and at free markets and conservative type thinkers. I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, people don't want to work for things. They just want it handed to them. It's human nature. I mean, humans want, by and large, to work the least they possibly can and earn the most they possibly can. That's human nature, just by definition. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that doesn't mean there's not people without ambition who want to work increasingly harder, earn more money. But when people start working increasingly harder, they expect to earn more money. And then eventually they realize that, you know, why work at all if I can get something for free? And that's the problem we run into. So the whole majority report, I mean, I'm sure they do some honest journalism and they have some really intelligent people on there. But I mean, if they're pushing leftism and they're pushing anti-free markets, they're basically deviating from what the country was founded on. Again, the rugged individual and private property rights and all of these things, and people controlling the government, not the government controlling the people. So they're really doing the opposite of what needs to happen as far as what they're projecting to the public. And I don't know. It's really sad. I mean, that's really why I'm doing this podcast, because I want young people to understand this stuff. You don't need to go down the road of victimhood and calling everyone a racist and thinking that we need no free markets in medicine or education because there's bad outcomes right now, because those bad outcomes are just because of government. So I don't know. I mean, it's also like the fight for 15 thing. I mean, people don't realize this. I'm sure these guys are part of that whole shtick, the fight for $15 an hour for minimum wage. I mean, that is really just people in the labor movement and big labor trying to reincarnate the fervor of the day, basically back in the 50s when unionization rates were much, much higher. And what I mean by that is this. No person working in fast food is asking for a 100% increase in pay. Like, they're not asking to get $7 or $8 and turn that into 15 or 16, right? That's the union's idea, because the union is going to have them fight for that, in air quotes, promise this lavish increase in raise. And then obviously part of that raise is going to go to supporting the unions, then go around bopping other employers on the head and really extorting them as well. So the fight for 15 thing is driven by labor unions who really support types like Bernie Sanders, who these people, the majority report, support. It's all this like this giant circle of mush and stupidity. And really, as it pertains to that labor laws too, and the minimum wage, I mean, looking hard at the minimum wage, I think we all know that, 95% of people who recycle through these minimum wage jobs depart them in under a year. And they're oftentimes young people starting out with their first job. And there's very, very, very slim amount of people even work that job for a full career. And to the extent that they do, they're probably mentally challenged or have some sort of disability. And the fact that they were offered a job at all is awesome, because I'm sure they're getting some sort of supplemental assistance from the government anyway. It's just really a way for their parents to kind of not worry about them and make sure they're earning a little bit of money and having some sort of purpose in life. So, the whole assault on like the fast food companies and the fight for 15 for other companies doesn't make any sense, because it's actually really irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, because the market clearing wage, and I spoke about this in my last podcast, is around $15 an hour nationally. Whether or not people like the majority report actually want to like reconcile those facts, it just is. There's pretty much any city in America right now has hundreds of third shift openings in a manufacturing facility that'll hire you for between, I don't know, $12 and $15 an hour, depending on where you live. That's just abundantly available in those skills. Maybe you can't even speak English and you don't even have a GED. But anyway, I just really want to make it clear that I had a good time on that. It was kind of some brouhaha to get some people pissed off a little bit, I guess, because that's what they need to hear. They need to get pissed. They need to get angry. When you're starting to come to the truth, you're going to get pissed off. Believe me, that's what happens. And then true liberation of mind is knowing the truth, where you're not going to be flustered. Just like I'm sitting there listening to Sam kind of speak that talk, and I just didn't really mind because it was inaccurate. I just kind of told what the truth was. So I felt good. I feel really good about it. While I didn't get to speak as much as I normally like to speak, because you guys know I like to talk, hence this podcast, well, at least I just told the truth while it was on there. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. So maybe some of his listeners will gravitate towards this. Maybe some trolls will trash it. It's perfectly fine. I really don't care. They can do what they want to do. Because going forward, I'm just going to keep pushing this liberty message, and just with a steady dose of liberty in any market or any aspect of the economy, things will get better for people and society. And issues like climate change, we need market forces to find the technology to assist in stopping climate change. All of these big ticket issues, the market can really prove to be wondrous and pay huge dividends. So just encapsulating it a little bit further, I really appreciated the time to go on that show. I thought it was funny. I liked calling in. I really wanted to do it again, but I don't know. I can have these intellectually sparring matches with people and find a way to do these things and obviously take them down, much like I did Sam and those guys, but I don't know if it's worth it. I almost want to just educate people and let them come to me and build that way. I don't think I need to be getting in little fights that people don't know what they're talking about. It's really unproductive, because if they don't want to come to the truth, I'm not going to force them. It's the way it is. This is arrogant as fuck is what I'm going to say. And it sounds awfully cultish, because keep in mind though, libertarians realize that the state is the cult, right? We don't want to be part of the state, which is the cult. But, Jesus and Christianity, they're in parts of the Bible, basically he's out there preaching or whatever, and he's preaching to people who don't want to listen. And, sometimes they don't listen until they die, and that's their life. And with libertarianism, it's the same type of thing. You're kind of preaching the truth, right? I don't know if people are religious on this podcast. I'm not necessarily that religious, but I know, like, by and large, markets is the truth versus that of government, right? Goods are distributed properly in a free market, most efficiently, better than that of government. There's a lot more peaceable outcomes through capitalism than there is that of government or some type of socialism like feudalism or anything like that. So basically, I'm just going to tell these guys the truth, and if they don't want to hear it, they don't want to hear it. So I don't really know. You basically got to throw in the towel. It's kind of what the Bible says. You don't really preach to these people till you're blue in the face. You kind of preach your message, and if they come and they go, they come and they go. You do what you can. But for the people who are genuinely interested, like I said, you recognize the sky is blue, the grass is green, the taxation is theft, or want to pile on, listen to me pick on people like that, and fools all over the place. It's good to make a mockery of these people, because we really want, at the end of the day, to make a mockery of people pushing nonsense and evil and immorality, and people just think you can, treat the world as zero-sum gain, if there's no consequences, and that people should, share the burden across the board of all these moral hazards that Bernie Sanders wants to create, because it's unjust. And me personally, 2019, I've paid upwards of $30,000 in taxes. That's right, 30000. It's basically been flushed down the drain. Guarantee it. It's been squandered. The roads are going to still continue to suck. Health insurance is going to be completely out of control. College education is going to be completely out of control in terms of price. Money is going to be diverted to programs, agencies, and departments that serve no purpose and really should just be collapsed. The military is going to continue to shoot off missiles and basically waste money, resources, time, and lives in the Middle East. And all these bad things are going to continue to happen. So I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's $30,000 I could have put into a rental property, and that's $30,000 the next year I could put into a second one. I mean, for crying out loud, I could probably own fucking 35 rental properties the next 35 years I have to work, but for the government. And of course, they're going to promise you this little pittance of Social Security and Medicare down the road, and that'll just be fine. That'll justify all of the money that they've stolen from me. But we all know that's not true. So again, want to wrap it up by saying shout out to Sam Seder's listeners for trashing me in the comments. I genuinely thought they were hilarious. Definitely feel kind of bad for those people. And then shout out to Sam for, being open-minded enough to at least speak to libertarians while they're just telling him the truth. He doesn't like it. At least they're speaking to each other. And again, it's not easy to articulate libertarianism. You do what you can, and you kind of put your best foot forward, and you go with what you believe. And taxation is theft, whether Sam Seder wants to recognize it or not. And that's all I got. So thanks for tuning in, guys. And I will see you on episode number 17. Thank you.